code hierarchy. So it's really easy to build code hierarchies, or basically like making a parent code and then making a subcode underneath that code. And then as the qualitative process goes, you might change your mind. You might realize that you want to move the code, or you might realize that two codes are really similar and they might actually be one code. So it's fairly easy to edit that, and you can like reparent a code. So you can move a code to be underneath a different code, or you can also merge two codes that you feel like are really the same code and just need to be combined together. Deduce is also really good for reviewing the excerpts. So when you code something, when you code an excerpt, like coding a sentence or a paragraph in a transcript, you like highlight it, and I'll show you that process here in a second, but you highlight it and then you apply a code that you have, or you create a new code. And then later on, after you've coded several transcripts, or at any point that you want to, you can click on that code and see all of the excerpts, all of the quotes for just that one code. And that's really convenient and easy to do. It's also, Deduce makes it easy to view code co-occurrence, which is where two codes kind of overlap each other, and you can pull up a table, and I'll show you that too. But you can look at all the excerpts where two codes overlap each other, and that's really convenient and helpful as well.
Yes, if you don't do anything.
Then, yeah, so in the analysis tab, there, like I said, there's that table that you can look at the code co-occurrence, but they also have some other helpful visualization tools, like looking at the codes by descriptors, and some other like tables and graphs that can be helpful, even if it's not something that you're going to include in your final product. Sometimes it's helpful for you as the researcher to just visualize the data in different ways and think about it and kind of understand what the data look like and how they interact with each other. So those visualization options are pretty nice. So I mentioned descriptors, and descriptors are really kind of a way for Deduce, for the program, to allow you to almost like tagging different either documents or different participants. You can add these things called descriptors, and it basically allows you to later on be able to filter the data or filter the results or the analysis by selecting the different descriptors that you would like. So this can be really helpful if you enter descriptors for like demographics, for example. So if you tag the all participants with whether they're male or female or their age, then later on you can use those filters to kind of ask yourself. Use those filters to ask yourself if you, maybe there's a difference between, the male perspective and the female perspective, or maybe there are different things that different age groups are saying about the topic that you're studying. So those can be pretty helpful, but they are kind of a pain to create. It's kind of an arduous task, but sometimes it can be really worth it. So that's something to keep in mind. And then one of the greatest parts about Deduce that we like the best is its affordability. It's one of the cheaper qualitative data analysis softwares out there. And it's also nice that you can pay by the month. So, you don't have to sign up for a full year. And then for some of the other programs, if you pay for a subscription, like you might only, if you want to get the cheapest version, you only get the online version, or there are some limited features. But Deduce is pretty much just like one straight fee, and you can do it for a month and then decide you don't need it for the next month, and then sign up for the month after that again. So that makes it really convenient and relatively affordable compared to some of the other programs that So in my opinion, I think Atlas TI, looks really nice. It flows a lot better. There aren't as many glitches, but it's really expensive. So, you have to weigh whether it's worth it or not. So I'm going to take you through a couple basic examples of how to use deduce real quick. I'm going to talk about how to actually code in the software, show you how easy it is to merge or reparent some of the codes. I'm going to show you how to review all the excerpts from the codes like I talked about, and then I'm going to show you some of those tables and analysis features that can be really helpful. So let me see if I can pull this up. Oh, of course, it kicked me out. All right, so this is the basic deduce screen that you have when you sign in. And you see these tabs kind of along this top row. And these are how you get to all the different features. So it starts you off with home, and you can kind of ignore most of this. And the project that I have pulled up right now is just a demonstration project. It's a demo project. So this is, pretty much made up data that deduce includes with your, with your account, so that you can kind of play around with it and get to learn it without potentially messing up your data or, doing something that you wish you hadn't done to your data set. So here in this middle part where my cursor is a list of all the media. So these are all of your transcripts or recordings or photos or images or whatever data you're trying to analyze. It all gets listed here after you upload them to your project. And then you click on one, and then this is where your transcript pops up, and this one has already been coded, and you can tell by the different highlighted colors, the different text pieces, the different excerpts and quotes highlighted in different colors. You can see on the left these little brackets, and if you hover over those, you can see which codes have been applied to those chunks of text, those excerpts. And if you click on that, it'll pull up here in the top right corner. It'll show you which codes that section has been applied with a code. But so that's what it looks like, just to kind of show you how the coding can look. But if you're coding it yourself, what you do is, let's see. So this data, I think this fake project is about reading books to children. And you can see here in the bottom right corner, the list of all the codes that they have so far. So let's say you want to code this brief sentence about he reads to TC about 3 times a week at night in Spanish. So I look over here and the codes, I think this would apply to reading by others. So what you do is you just highlight that text, and then you can either double click the code and it'll apply that code to what you had highlighted. But then you can also, let me get this excerpt highlighted again. You can right click the highlighted text and add a code that way. And you can either find all your codes there, or you can type in a new code and you can create your own new code that way as well. So that's the basics about coding. And then you can also see this is the kind of coding hierarchy that I was describing earlier, where there are parent codes, and then the child's codes that are underneath that. So under reading by mother, they have duration, routine, frequency, and you can even go a third level and have grandchild codes, if you will. So these are the codes underneath routine, and routine is underneath reading by mother. And you can click on those arrows to kind of hide or reveal some of those things. So let's say you're going through and you realize that this code reading by others maybe it should be part of, or like it's related to reading by mother, because reading by mother is actually an example of somebody else reading to the child. So maybe you want to add reading by mother to reading by others. So what you do is you go to the code, and this little cog wheel is the settings, and you can see it pops up and tells you that this is how you edit the code. So you pull that up, and this is also where you add your definition. This is how you define your code, and that can be helpful for remember how to best apply the codes to the text. But in this code settings box, you can also merge it or reparent it. So merging two codes basically says that these two codes are really the same thing, and I'm just going to turn them into one code, and every excerpt that has been highlighted and coded with either of the codes is now just going to be changed to be under this new merged code. Reparenting is kind of what I was describing with the reading by mother and reading by other, where if you want to move a code like reading by mother, if you want to move that to reading by others, you want to reparent it, and you just click on that and it asks you which code you want to move where, and it's pretty easy to do that. So I'm not going to do that, but I just wanted to show you how to do that. And then the other thing I wanted to show was how easy it is to see all the excerpts. So let's say we want to see all the excerpts for reading by others. So you just hover over that code again, and these little quotation marks, you can see it tells you that's what you click on to view the code excerpts, and it even tells you how many excerpts there are for that code. So you click on that, and now these are all of the excerpts or quotes that are coded with the tag reading by others. And you can click on each one and it'll pull up the example. And then if you're like, well, what context was this set in? You can click view in context, and it'll show you the quote in the transcript itself. And this is a great way to just scroll through and read all of the different quotes that have been coded with that single code. And you can also kind of see, when they're also coded with other things as well. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to show you is a little bit about this analysis tab. So again, we were in home, and then we clicked on a media, we clicked on one of the documents, but now I'm going over to the analyze tab. And this is where it has a ton on here, but you can kind of ignore most of it, honestly. But there are a couple of these charts that we find really helpful. So if you open up the code chart tab, and you go down, and this is code co-occurrence, and this is pretty cool. So this lists all the codes across the side and across the top, so you can see where each of them intersect on the table. So this is reading by mother, and you can see how often that intersects with reading by others. So there's overlap between those two codes 11 times. So this can help you think about, are these two codes maybe even saying the same thing, or, just gets you to think about what's going on that makes these two codes happen so many times at the same time. And you can even click on that and it'll pull up all the excerpts or quotes when the two codes overlap each other. So that's really convenient as well. The other table that I wanted to talk through real quick was the code by descriptor table, or yes, codes by descriptor. And this can be really helpful as well. So, here are some of the descriptors that they have included in this demonstration project. And so they've labeled some of their transcripts with, let's see, what's a good one? It looks like they've broken down duration into different chunks of time. So you can kind of see, this is by population density, sorry. So this is actually looking at different population densities and, for example, whether they have morning routines or not, or the frequency of how often they read to the child, based on those different things. And you can kind of pick which things you want to look at in this table. And that can be, that can really illuminate some interesting things and help you understand your data a little bit better. But don't get fooled, because this analyze tab makes it almost seem like it's going to analyze the data for you. But don't forget, this is really just a tool to help you see the data differently and help you organize and store and work with the data, but you are still the primary tool for analysis. and you are the analyzer. The program, the software doesn't do the analysis for you. It just gives you some shortcuts to help you do that a little bit better. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint real quick and briefly go through some of the things that drive us crazy about Deduce. So like I said, the descriptors are kind of a pain to set up, but once you do, you can do some cool things with them. Sometimes you can get overwhelmed with all the features in Deduce because they throw a lot of stuff in there. And so sometimes that's a bit much, but if you know where to go and which features to focus on, you can kind of ignore all the other things. The other thing is sometimes Deduce gets glitchy and they run into, it'll freeze in the middle of something, or you have to shut it down or restart your computer a bunch of times. So sometimes that gets frustrating, but actually for a while now, for a couple of months, we haven't had any of those glitches. So I think they're actively working to try to help make those better. But every once in a while you run into some glitches, and that gets frustrating, especially when you're deep in the coding process, in that flow brain state. Some of the other tech things that get glitchy, I showed you how to highlight the text, highlight an excerpt or a quote in a transcript to apply a code. Watch that highlighted portion, because sometimes where you click your mouse and where it thinks you clicked your mouse might be two different places. So a lot of times I'll highlight a whole sentence, but when I look again, the program didn't start highlighting until halfway through the sentence. So you have to watch out for that. And then the tutorials really are helpful for the basic features, but if you have any more advanced questions, the tutorials are a little bit lacking compared to some of the other softwares out there. And as Nala Vega pointed out to us, some of the other programs have these community support forums where users come on and talk about ways that they've been able to figure out how to work around some of the issues. And for Deduce, it's really mostly coming straight from the company. So that's one unfortunate drawback. And then if you ever run into issues with billing, I know we had this problem for several months, but we haven't had this problem in a long time. But for a while, there was an issue with the billing, and it pops up this obnoxious reminder that says, like, we're going to remind you to pay your bill basically every 10 minutes while you're coding. So that hasn't happened in a long time, but when it was happening, it was pretty frustrating. So like I said, the other alternative is Atlas TI is my personal favorite. There are lots of other options out there, and it's just kind of what's affordable for you and what works best, and also a matter of personal taste. So for me, the things I like about Atlas TI are that it functions really smoothly. It's pretty user friendly. There are lots of really good guides. They have a whole YouTube channel to explain things. When you highlight excerpts in a transcript in Atlas TI, you can expand the highlighted portion and change it. Whereas in Deduce, you have to cancel out the entire highlighted thing and then re-highlight the new section. So I like that feature in Atlas TI. You have a little more control over the size of the text in all of the different windows, and you can have multiple windows open at the same time. So Deduce, you have one screen, one window, and everything happens in that window. But with Atlas TI, especially if you have two monitors or two screens, you can have your code list up on one screen and your transcript over here, and then maybe even, some of the analysis features open over there too. So it's nice to be able to spread your workspace out a little bit on your screen. And then it does have that community aspect, that kind of open source forum for tips and tricks for how to use it and how to find features and work around some of the issues. And we can ignore that last point that was from a previous presentation. So that's a real quick tutorial for Deduce and a little bit about Atlas TI. And I think Emily is going to talk a little more about Atlas TI later. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Lynette Lardy, who's going to talk about some other features that are good for integrating technology into interviews and focus groups, especially.
Thank you, Nick. And I wanted to start by saying Akwaba, welcome. I'm Ghanaian. Both of my parents are from Ghana, but I was born here in the States. I'm gonna show us Slido. Sorry, one moment with my technology. Okay, so if everyone has some sort of internet connection to or cell phone, if you can open up another tab or you can just watch along with us, everyone can scan the QR or go to slido.com and type in this code. And we're going to start with an icebreaker. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to do that. So one of the things that's really neat about Slido is that you can present it through the website or as with us at Children's Mercy, we use Microsoft Teams. And so this can be integrated into our Microsoft Teams, which is pretty nice. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start the first question. Okay, so with this being an active poll, if you weren't at work, where would you be? So with this question, it's a word cloud. So you can type any word or just a handful of words about where you'd be. So we have home. I entered riding a bike. Oh, great. We have a lot of participation. Someone would be at a bar. We have church, outdoors, on a beach, gardening. I like that. And you guys can see how home got bigger because we had more people who were clicking on that as an option or typing that in as an option. So that's one of the cool features with Slido, just in using word clouds. And what you'll see as you explore other software for polling, some of them are a little tricky with if you put something like riding a bike or on a beach, it'll split up the words, but with Slido, it keeps the whole phrase together, which is really nice. So let me go on to the next one. So that was a word cloud. Oh, bar. So home or a bar? Would it be a chop bar? Okay, now for the next question. Here we go. What's the strangest thing you did while attending a meeting online? So with this, you have the option of selecting multiple things. That's why there's the checkbox. Wonderful. It's neat to see how the percentages change as we have more participation as well, just to get a feel for where your team is at. I think one of the other great features about using Slido is that this can even be used for team meetings. Maybe you're just trying to break the ice with your team members or brainstorming ideas for a project. So this is pretty neat. But definitely made breakfast is on there. I know I've made breakfast many times. So agreed. Now I have a quiz. So this is kind of fun. You can type in your name or a name or whatever alias you would like to use. I put my initials LL. Okay, we have Kenny. Wonderful. And as you can see, it's waiting for me to start the quiz, but I'm going to wait and give you all a couple of minutes, or not minutes, sorry, a couple seconds. Wonderful. Okay, I'll go ahead and start the quiz. So I was inspired by Nella Vega, our other team member, just to make something that was very African for our Slido. And so, of course, which country has the best jollof rice? The fun thing is you can select multiple answers for this. Oh, there's a leaderboard as well. That's kind of neat. So you can see who answered the question first. So Nalabega answered first. She knows. I've taught her well with West African cuisine. Just kidding. She knew about it before. But you can hide the leaderboard as well. And here we can see Ghana with the 4 exclamation marks won. But of course, the answer is Ghana for everything. And the last question, oh, there we go. It shows that as well. The last question that I have, which brings us into my PowerPoint slide presentation, is which is a better use for polling in a focus group setting? Would you rather use it in an icebreaker setting, or just like to open up the conversation and discussion, or an activity to spur on conversation or generate data? Well, this is definitely how it's being used for this presentation, to spur on conversation. But the great thing about Slido and other polling software is that it can be used for both. So let me stop sharing and go to the PowerPoint real quick. Okay, you can see my screen. So just giving you an overview again, we use the live polls. You can even do a Q&A portion where you have participants ask questions during the discussion and you can answer those live, as well as ideas. And I think this is fun that you can do this in Slido, but Nalabega is going to talk more about this in using Miro, about brainstorming and other ways to gather information from participants. And as you'll see at the end of our presentation, when we send out the slides, there's an analytics feature, which I have a screenshot of this that can show you how participants answered and just the word cloud. So you get a really good overview report of everything. So the big considerations for using Slido: there's a free account that you can get, which offers you 3 questions per month or up to 4 with 100 users. So that's pretty nice. But then with the paid account, which for us is $17.50 US per month, or $60 US for a one-time event for unlimited features. And again, as I had said, that it can be used for both. And there are a lot of different polling softwares or polling applications that you can use, like Poll Everywhere is one that we use a lot that's nice to integrate into PowerPoint. And this one can be integrated into Microsoft Teams, which is what we use at Children's Mercy, which is nice for the, because everything's integrated. But you can also use an application or a website called Kahoot, which is fun. It's visually appealing. We used it for one of our events, our coffee hour, last fall. And then Quizzes is used in education. But one of the big things, I have this as we used in our Children's Mercy presentation. But one of the big things I wanted to touch on, and I will have this in the appendix for you, or just add these links for you all, is that you can integrate polling into Zoom, which is the platform we're on now. And so there, you would need to have a paid account, I believe, but there's more information that I'll be sharing through some links that will be in the PowerPoint for you all to look through. But it's really neat and just a great way to interact with your participants and to get information and talk and get a consensus. But at this point, I will go ahead and turn over to Nella Vega.
Thank you very much, Lynette. And yes, she did indeed train me that Ghana has the best jollof rice. So as Emily introduced me, my name is Melanie Ross, and to start my presentation, I'm going to put a question that I would love for everyone to answer in the chat. And this will kind of help me really give you a presentation on Miro, which is what I was planning to do. So that question is in there, and I'll say it out loud. The question is, who is your favorite African author? So if you can, for just take a few minutes and put who your favorite African author is, and it will all make sense in a few minutes. So what I'm going to be sharing is Miro. When the pandemic happened and a lot of us in the West started working from home, a lot of technology was developed to facilitate working from home. And one of the things that happened is there was a lot of tech that was developed for collaboration. And what I'm sharing is Miro, which I will in a second. And what Miro does, and what I kind of think it would be very useful for, is that it allows you as a researcher who's doing research, qualitative research, to enhance things like your focus groups. So I know many of us have done focus groups where you have a question up there and people can put sticky notes to answer the question that you've asked them. And then at the end of the day, you take the picture of that sticky note, those sticky notes, and kind of try to analyze that data. Now, if you think about doing that in person, that can get very clunky and hard. Like, how do you save the data? Do you carry the whole poster with you to your office if you lose sticky notes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where this is coming from. And what Miro, and the first rule of technology, though, is that the technology will always break. So always keep that in mind. This is not to say that get rid of the whole poster board with the sticky notes. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you a Miro board. So what you're seeing right now is a Miro board. So right now I have on this Miro board, I have two frames. That's the terminology that Miro itself uses. And it is two different focus groups that I have quote unquote facilitated. I really just have presented on them. So the first focus group was one of our skill series that we did at Children's Mercy a couple of weeks ago, where I asked the group and asked them what movie one person should watch in their lifetime. And you can all actually see their answers right now. That's not supposed to happen, but we'll get back to that. So you can see their answers as this is what the group said. Now, this has been locked and no one can change it. So I can analyze this data at a later date. And so right now I asked you all, who is your favorite African author? And if this was working the way it should, which is I would embed this in Zoom and you would be able to use the sticky notes and answer these questions, and I would be able to lock this particular frame and not change it and be able to analyze it at a later date. So because I'm unable to embed it in Zoom simply because I work at Children's Mercy, and Children's Mercy does not really want to use Zoom because it does not have the capability to protect PHI, so personal health information. I'm unable to embed it in my Children's Mercy Zoom link. But this is one thing I will point out, it is a free service. And you have access, you're able to access it anywhere. And if you do decide to pay for it, there are some extra perks that you get for using it. So how this would really enhance a focus group, for example, would be if you were in an online focus group, and I'm saying that this is an example of an online focus group, you're able to ask your participants, and your participants would be able to come into the Miro board and answer your question. So one of the things that you have access to, and I will kind of give you a very quick, brief overview of Miro, you have access to templates. A lot of these templates, you can use them in many different ways. You can use a mind map, and it's not just for focus group, you can also use it for your collaborators and your research teams. You have a lot of templates that you can use. And if you dig really deeper into the Miro templates, there are what they call community templates, and there are also specific templates that have been created for health research, and you can actually get them and see how you use them. And I'm just giving an example of different community-based templates. Now, Miro does have its own templates that it has built, and if you don't want to use the templates, that is okay too, because you can just build your own, what they call a frame. And so this frame allows you to put questions. So as you can see, the question I had for you today was, who's your favorite African author? And so thinking about the idea of the sticky notes, once again, you have a possibility of picking a sticky note like you saw me do, and then I can put the answer in, and you can type in. I know this was an author that came up. And so that's one answer. And looking, you can all see, yes, Ama Ata Aido, one of my favorites. So these, I can make as many sticky notes as I can. They come in different colors. You can even, let me type, I can't talk and type, but I will. And all of this can all be in here. And when I'm done, and I'll type one more, Wole Soyinka, and I'll use a different color. And right now I'm using large sticky notes, but you can make them, you can size up, you can size down, and I can lock, I'm going to close the chat just quickly. I can absolutely pick this frame and lock it. What that means, no one can move it, no one can touch it, and I can lock the entire thing. So right now it's locked, but I can open it and I can move things around. I think I locked that one. So I can move things and play with them, and however your aesthetic design looks like, right? Whatever you want your design to look like, and you can move anywhere, move the sticky notes in any way, shape, or form. And when you're done, so if we're imagining that this is a focus group, I can lock all this and no one can touch it, and I can move out, zoom out. And later on, let's say I had multiple focus groups where I asked the same question over and over again, I can put a date, I can date this and say this was a focus group that we had on the 30th of June, 2023. Lock it. So now it's there. Now I have this piece of data, the visual data that I can come to and look at and analyze and say, for example, one of the in a group of 30 graduate students, 40 graduate students, undergraduate students who attended a presentation on Miro, the most common, they're the most common author that most of them liked was Chinua Achebe. So this really enhances the way you can do focus groups. Now I've shown one style of Miro, like this includes using the frames where a frame just frames out where you're going to put your information. And I've just shown you sticky notes, which is just a way for people to stick things in. You can do a lot more than just doing that. You can also use, it has the option to use pens. So you can even have people draw. So imagine you're having a focus group with, say, young people, and you're like, you know what, I want you to draw, when I say the word author or book, I want you to draw for me what you think, right? And so they can draw. You can do a lot, you can, highlight things. You could say, ooh, Chinua Achebe is really important. Let me highlight that. I want us to focus on Chinua Achebe. We're going to be talking about Chinua Achebe. And so let me highlight that. So Miro does really give you a lot of tools that you can use both in your research, especially around focus groups, as well as in research planning. So for right here, I just used the example of focus groups. But you can do a lot more with Miro. The other advantage of Miro is it has, which is the opposite of Deduce, is it does have a huge community of users out there who have gone through it and can give you a lot of guidance if you get lost. Miro itself as a company also has a whole institute that teaches you how to use their product. So there's a lot of support with using Miro. Now I'm also using the free version. When you get, if you really like it, I feel like the free version does what I need it to do. But if you decide you want to pay for it, or your institution or your grant, or you have extra money lying around, you want to pay for it, then you get access to more things. So for example, you can export your board somewhere else. You can turn this board into a PDF. So you can take a screenshot of it and put it in your publications, be it whatever kind of publications you're doing. You can also import things into the Miro board. So you can import things from it. It especially works really well with the Google suite of items. So you can import Google Docs documents. You can import the Google Slides. You can even import. You can definitely import PowerPoint, but it plays, for lack of a better word, it plays really well with other apps. Now, I want to point out that you can actually embed it in Zoom. And so if you just pick the app directory in Zoom, you can embed it. I just couldn't embed it because my institution does not work well with Zoom. So this is just another way of really thinking how we can harness online technology to help us both make research more accessible to people who might not be able to travel, but also giving us a time to really think through what we're going to be doing for research. So it works both ways. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily, who's going to kind of walk us through a little bit more on AI and where we're going with the new AI. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Nalubega. I hope some of those examples were helpful for some of you thinking about your qualitative research. All of these tools are available and pretty accessible. Deduce even has a month free if you want to try it. And focus groups and interviews are increasingly happening online with a lot of projects. So something like Slido and Miro is a really good thing to think about with different forms of engagement. So we're really excited to have found these tools. They're really useful in our work. Another tool that is really kind of emerging on the horizon that I want to talk about a little bit is artificial intelligence, specifically natural language processing artificial intelligence. Many of you may have heard of ChatGPT, which came out very recently and is really the first kind of main public NLP AI tool. So I would love to hear from you in the chat box, or you're welcome to take off your microphone and share what you've heard about ChatGPT and if you have ever tried it. Is there anyone out there that has tried ChatGPT or has just heard about it? Somebody has tried it. For those of you that have tried it, what were your thoughts about it? Yes, and you used it before. What are your thoughts about it? And specifically, what are your thoughts about it in academic research and in qualitative research? Michael echoes anyone, a great source of learning. Okay, so maybe You might have been asking it questions and getting some answers. It can be a great source of learning. Has anyone heard of the use of tools like this in coding qualitative transcripts? Yes, and okay, Justine, thanks. In the field of dietitians, can be really detailed. Thanks for sharing all of the places it's coming up in your work and your lives. It's definitely coming up in qualitative research. Deduce, I think, might also be working on integrating some AI coding tools, but for now, the only qualitative coding software that I know has some capabilities using ChatGPT is Atlas TI. And it's still very, very new. As of a month or two, they've really rolled it out in its beta testing. So it's still not powerful enough to kind of, take a lot of data, but it is interesting to try. The way Atlas TI advertises their AI coding is gain qualitative insights in minutes instead of weeks. Say goodbye to endless manual coding and hello to AI-driven assistance. Basically, they say put your transcripts in and then let ChatGPT code them for you. What are people's initial thoughts about that? What do you think? Do you think that this would be useful or perhaps not as useful as coding by hand? Could it make life easier? Could it be useful and faster? That's what Atlas TI tends to promise, for sure. Very useful. Would you trust a computer to do the coding for you completely? Lots of people are excited that it might speed it up. Does anyone depends on the output? You would have to guide it. Okay, so now I'm seeing some people, yeah, like how accurate is it? I mean, I know we know with qualitative research, a lot of the coding is really thoughtful decisions that you make as a researcher. So I wouldn't trust AI completely. I think this is, and I would love to try using the AI code. People have a lot of different opinions on it. I'll show you what happened when I tried it in Atlas TI. And again, this is really new. It's not available in every program, but I think it's really becoming more and more available. So we will see it as we continue doing our field. I put in just 2 transcripts of interviews, and the AI feature on Atlas TI gave me 245 codes, which I will say is a little bit overwhelming. I would never want to work with a code book that had 245 codes just on 2 transcripts. But at the same time, when I was going through some of the codes, it was really useful. And I will say these were transcripts that I had already coded in Deduce inductively. So I already had a code book that I made myself with the other researcher I was working with. And I compared it to what the AI did. I was really surprised to see that there was actually a lot of similarities in the types of things that the AI picked up and the things that I picked up. There were also things that I saw and that I named for my code that weren't really in here, that I was glad I didn't rely completely on AI to do it, because there were things that I saw that didn't come out of the AI model. Similarly, there were some things that the ChatGPT did and found that made me think twice about my coding, that made me think, is this concept actually present in my data? This might be a better phrase to use it. This might be something that I'm not seeing in my data. Something like cognitive dissonance was an aha moment to me. maybe I should integrate that into my work. So my big takeaway is I do think that the AI tool in qualitative research coding can be like another member of your research team. Me personally, I wouldn't depend on it completely to do all the coding for me, but I think it's often useful to see what it comes up with and to go back to what you're working on and maybe come up with some new ideas, some new phrases, some new concepts that that you didn't think of before, in the same way that having another person on the research team is useful because they just have a different perspective too. So we talked a little bit about these first two questions. What do you all think will become of this tool in 5 to 10 years? Do you think that you know, we will really be seeing this take over the field, or how do you think this is going to kind of shape the work that qualitative researchers do? I think it's something we need to keep an eye on. And if you have any access to Atlas TI that you can try it, it's interesting to try it. I also think it will be coming in the other major qualitative analysis programs. And ChatGPT is learning every day from the things that people put into it. So my takeaway at this point, again, it's still very early, is it can be useful, but I wouldn't rely on it completely, because your brain is ultimately the thing that needs to drive your research and your analysis. But it is out there, and I think we will start to see it more and more in the research papers we read and in the types of projects and collaborations that we come on. So just some closing thoughts. Again,
Emily, before
yes,
you close,
go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick thing that I learned yesterday, at least for those of us who work in the United States and with the NIH funding. So with AI, one of the things that people have been talking about is that using AI to review manuscripts, which is a problem those of us who like write research and they gets held. Well, the NIH just came out and said that you cannot use AI to review your manuscripts, and if you do that, that is a violation of confidentiality. So people are thinking of AI outside of just like coding. It's also they're thinking about how it affects our whole scope of research, from design all the way to publications. I just wanted to like point that out, that NIH, at least in the United States, has said if you use AI for paper review, that is a violation of confidentiality, and you will and they're really strict that if you are found using AI, you will be ineligible going forward for NIH funding.
Fascinating. And I think this relates back to some of the early comments. AI is really creeping up in all sorts of things that we do in our day-to-day work, whether it's reviewing papers, writing, working in clinical settings. Thank you for sharing that. In terms of the qualitative coding, keep your eyes on it. Know that it could be a useful tool, that there are definitely two ends of the spectrum. Some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to let this, it's going to revolutionize qualitative research and all of our, day-to-day coding woes are done. And others really think, it's really a human capacity to interpret the meanings and text in the relationship research. And I think most of us might find ourselves somewhere in the middle as this technology becomes more and more pervasive. So keep your eyes out for when it might touch what you're working on, and think really critically about the things it might offer, and also the things that it might, the problems that it might bring about, and in a number of ways. So when our PowerPoint is sent out, just take note of these resources, the main technologies that we've gone over today. Lynette, I think this is also, we would love, Lynette has been setting up our events with some feedback. If you would be so kind, I can also put this in the chat box. Oops, sorry. To let us know that you're here, what you thought of the talk. It's really an honor for us to speak to you all, because we're typically doing these talks within our own bubble in our own institution, but to hear what you thought of it and how useful it might be for you would really, really be great for us. So we'd love to hear from you. And I know we're a little bit over time, but for those of you that are still here, if you have any questions or issues that you want to bring for discussion, we'd love to hear from you.
I had one question for Nick. This is Kwame. Whenever I use deduce, one of the challenge I had is that I couldn't always close the account. So I would leave it and come back 3 months later and they say, oh, you have $50 in debt and you need to kind of pay us money. So I just wasn't sure, like, if you are done with one project, do you have to sign up with a different email, or do you completely, how do you close out from an account so that I don't keep having to pay money or something? Thank you.
Great question. And I've always had kind of the institution pay for my account. So I've never actually gone through the process of fully closing out. Emily, do you know anything about how to officially and fully cancel an account?
All I can say to that is Deduce is kind of glitchy and isn't perfect, but their help people are typically pretty responsive. So I think like the policy that is on paper is if you don't sign in for a month, you don't have to pay for it. So I would be careful if you're not using it to not sign in for the month. But there are often problems, like Nick says, we often get a lot of bubbles for paying, even if we already did pay. Sometimes it does just take an email to them. They're glitchy, but they're pretty responsive. And if there's something kind of not looking right for your bill, they might be able to take care of it, like on a one-on-one help desk thing. But yeah, it can be annoying. The month to month is good in theory, but when it doesn't work and it bugs you to pay it, it can be annoying. Are there any other questions or things that you want to talk about with technology and qualitative research?
Hi, Emily. This is Esnam.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I want to ask about this. First of all, this is a very insightful presentation. I want to ask about ChatGTP.
Yeah.
Is it possible for you to ask ChatGTP to generate a transcript for you without you feeding it?
To generate a transcript.
Maybe generate a transcript on this and this for me.
From a recording, or just from its own kind of like insight?
Yeah, from its own insight.
It's a really, really interesting question. I've never tried to do that. I'm sure it would come up with something. And if you try it, I'd be interested to hear what it comes up with. I'm not sure that transcript would be much value in research, because it's not really from a participant, but I could see it being potentially valuable for teaching or something like that. It's a really interesting idea. So I think after this presentation, I'm going to try and see what it comes up with. What were your thoughts about that, Esaman, about generating a transcript? Kind of where were you going with that thought? What would you be using that for?
No, so I'm thinking that's going to make us very lazy researchers because I mean I've tried ChatGPT and it can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you could just, you don't necessarily have to go to the field and then you ask ChatGPT to generate something for you and you are, it does it.
I mean, I think like to generate a transcript, I could see that like actually being pretty useful for teaching if you want like a fake transcript and have your student analyze, but it's never from, it wouldn't be from a real participant. And remember, the way it works is it pulls from all of the depths of the internet and things that have been done before and just creates something. So what you're getting is it's, you know, something it's coming up with, but it's not really based on, you know, novel research, novel ideas. So I don't necessarily think in research papers where we would see AI transcripts in qualitative research in the way we're doing it now. I've seen some studies that have used, you know, AI to, for instance, answer patient questions and see how that works and have studied the use of AI in communication. But as far as generating transcripts to get a meaning about what participants and populations think about an issue, I would think that that is probably not a step of the research it could do. I think reviewers would want to, you know, would question what information you're getting if you're not talking directly to participants. But you're right, in a lot of ways it can tempt us to skip a lot of the burdensome steps.
Can I add something to your
Yes.
question, SNM? So the way with AI, if you teach it, so the way it learns, you can get ChatGPT and you can teach it to do your particular research, right? So let's say you have a bunch of transcripts and you just put a couple in and then it starts to learn how to generate those transcripts and you ask it to do that. The problem is, right, after a certain point, it will just begin making things up based on what it's learned, right? The way I always talk about AI is like, think of a child who's learning to talk. Like they'll start using words that they don't really know what they mean, but they sound like they should be there. And that is, so it can generate a transcript for you, but you have to teach it. The other problem with AI in that way is that you lose that human part, like the stuff that we just know because we're alive and we've lived life and we've done this work a long time, right? Like qualitative research or even interviewing, that you can start, it won't have that because it just doesn't have your lived experience as a researcher or as someone who is interviewing. So you do lose that. So yes, you can teach it to write you a transcript, but you will miss out the good information that we really are looking for when we go into the field to do research, right? So that is like, right now, one of the things just for fun that me and my husband who works in AI are doing is we're training a ChatGPT on statistics, and it's really fun, but there's a lot of things that we're like, oh, it's missing this thing and that is not there. So it is a very, like Emily said, I do agree, it's a fun teaching tool and you can do a lot of fun and interesting things, but when it comes down to the meat and bones of actual research, it will miss a lot of things, I think is one of the things that we're trying to see, we're kind of seeing. So that's my thoughts on ChatGPT. I mean, it's both fun, but sometimes I'm like, that's not, as with any algorithm, it runs on that algorithmic idea is at some point, it just can't learn and it just starts to spit out nonsense. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a few minutes to go, and anyone who would want to ask any questions or get to know more about our speakers can raise up their hands or type their questions in the chat box, and then we can answer that and then we call it a day.
Nick, my last question is how can deduce help us build from codes to themes? Like, how do you use the analytical tools to help you build themes after you're done with the coding?
That's a great question. And I think we have probably half an entire presentation about how to move from codes to themes. But maybe just a brief thought about it is, so, codes are kind of how we capture the essence of the data that we see in the transcripts, or in, we label the data with different ideas, and the way that codes interact with each other and the relationships between the codes are how we start to think about themes and kind of these overarching categories. So you kind of you think about how codes relate to each other, and you can kind of lump them into different categories. And then how those categories tell the story and kind of the main point of what you think is important to come from all of the data, that's how you start thinking about the themes. So, you might have some transcripts that talk about the use of, well, I'll just give some of my dissertation themes and codes just as a simple example. So I was looking at integrated healthcare, so combining physical and mental healthcare, and some of my codes went to, like, basically we're labeling excerpts and quotes about how the mind-body connection resulted in outcomes. So, it was like how the mind impacts physical health, and then how the body impacts mental health. So then I started seeing how those different codes ended up telling me the way that the different providers conceptualize the mind-body connection in the context of pediatric healing. So I guess suffice it to say, or to put it shortly, it's really the interplay between the different codes and how the story is coming out of the data. That's kind of how you get at themes. Yeah, it can be kind of a complicated process, and if I had more time, I might go into more detail. But I don't know, Emily or Malabega or Lynette, any other thoughts on that?
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, this talk is from our Qualitative 2.0 series. So we didn't really have time to go into a lot of that. Some great resources on that we can send your way. But yeah, like Nick said, the process of really grouping your codes and finding connections between them and working in that hierarchy is really the heart of it all. And we'd be happy to kind of walk people through that process in another presentation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I don't think we have any more questions, and so would want to say a very big thank you to Emily, to Nick, to Lynette, and to Nalbega. Thank you so much for this great and intriguing presentation. I must admit we've learned a lot, and we hope that you will get to see you another time in another presentation. Thank you very much. And to everybody, the recording will be sent to your emails, and so would recommend that you check your emails for that. And then we would inform you of our next series, and that would also be in your email as well. Thank you very much for coming, and have a great weekend. Or Dr. Sechi, would you want to say anything? All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for coming, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
That was lovely.